I'm Pastor Henry Hildebrandt. I have a letter in my hand here that was put together by 23 churches in Manitoba, Canada, just very recently, just this last week. If I titled this video, I would have to title it 23 churches deem themselves non-essential. Why would I say that? Well, we know that not everything is closed in Manitoba, but just the non-essential things. And for 23 churches in Steinbach, Manitoba, to put a letter together and voluntarily shut down their churches, that means they deem themselves non-essential. Not only are they saying that they are willing to obey the health officials, but they're saying we support them in this call. That seems tremendous to me. That seems tremendous. They say that we believe that Manitoba's current public health orders in no way contravene our ability to obey and worship God. So are you saying that if you cannot gather in the meeting house, that does not contravene your ability to worship God? And then people are telling me that yes, we still gather, just not in person. Is that a new normal? Is that something new that human beings have not known before, that you are together but not in person? That seems very, very contradictory to me. And then they go on in this letter and they're saying that it is for the greater good of our society. You're telling me that closing the churches is for the greater good of our society? I totally disagree. It cannot be. Not according to the Bible. They end the letter with saying, we believe that the sacrifices asked of us at this time, mask wearing and physical distancing, for example, pale in comparison to the sacrifice Christ made on our behalf. Now we're totally off, because it's not we cannot call that a sacrifice. It is taking away our freedom, our God-given freedom. Has nothing to do with the sacrifice. If it was a sacrifice, like we thought it was at the beginning of this so-called pandemic, obviously, and I was the first one, I could say, in Aylmer to say, absolutely will we shut our doors and not have church services for 2 weeks. Not a problem. We can come up with that sacrifice. But since then, we're now going into month number 9. We know that we're not talking about a sacrifice. We know that we're now talking about being socially conditioned to see what we can do. Can they make us sit apart in our church services? Can they actually put masks on us? Would the church people go as far as actually coming into a church building where they're supposed to shout the high praises of God and where they're supposed to sing from the bottom of their heart? Would the church people actually go as far as putting a mask on and sit 6 feet apart? Would they do it if we told them that they were non-essential, that they were supposed to close the church doors? Well, 28 churches in Steinbach, Manitoba just signed a letter agreeing to just that. We will close our church doors temporarily. Interestingly enough, I have another paper here in front of me. Of course, we know that the Manitoba Premier has been quite upset about this whole thing, and he has some interesting mixed up information here. He says, Mr. Pallister, the Premier of Manitoba, he says that he attributes the case surge in the province to a large protest that took place a week ago. Well, Mr. Premier, it doesn't go that quick. It doesn't go that quick. We haven't had people at the rally and then they quickly all got sick and then they were all tested, and now we find out we have a large percentage of people having COVID-19. Doesn't quite work that way. Interesting enough, he says, the Premier says, I have it here in front of me, the Premier says, I quote, We had about 700 people gathered together last weekend and decided that they would have an idiotic protest. That's what we would call name calling. That's tremendous. That's tremendous that that word is used when people practice their God-given freedom, constitutional freedom to express their opinion, to call that an idiotic protest. But that's what he said. He said it's also clear that as a direct consequence of that we have this COVID number increased. CBC was there, so I gather from this that CBC and the Premier must not be on the same page, at least not on this page here. It says the CBC News reporter was at the protest and counted roughly 100 people. Well, his count was off as well. Neither of them can count, but that's what this paper says here. Then we have the Chief Provincial Public Health Officer, Dr. Brandt Rusen. He told reporters on Friday, he says he did not see any direct link between the protest and COVID-19 cases at this time. So this kind of shows you what we're dealing with at this time, not just in Manitoba, not just in Ontario, not just in Canada, but worldwide. This is what people like me and many others, doctors, lawyers, pastors, teachers, that's what many of us are saying is, why do we have this uncertain sound? Why do we have these discrepancies? Why does Dr. Fauci tell us beginning of the year we don't need to wear a mask, and then 3 months later supposedly science has changed and now we're supposed to wear a mask? That's what I'm calling attention to, is what is happening here. I stand here today to let you know that we will absolutely not agree with what these 23 churches have just done. In the time when the people need us the most, we don't close our church doors. Our church doors are open, and I absolutely do not volunteer to close them. We must be there for the people. We need more prayer now than ever. We need more church now than ever. We need to gather. We need to be what God wants us to be in this time. And I get messages and emails and phone calls, people pleading with me, can you please talk to my pastor and ask him if we could please gather, because human beings need to do that. May God help us to be clear on this. May God help us to take a stand in this critical time. In closing, I want to say that I am not at all bitter against anyone. I have no hard feelings against any of these 23 pastors. I just regret seeing them taking such a drastic stand and falling for this. I think the picture that comes to my mind of the three Hebrew brothers, when they stood there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when all the rest kneeled down, they did not kneel down thinking that they could still pray to their own God. They did not kneel down thinking that, well, at least we can still do a live stream, we can still gather that way. They said, we are not careful to answer thee, O King. They stood there when the rest were kneeling. That's what God is calling on us in this time. The churches need to stand. Pastors, it's our time to stand for the people when they need us the most. God bless you.